Hey guys, this is a quick tutorial to teach you guys how to use simcraft in order to figure out what things are upgrades for your characters, figure out what you should be reforging, what you should be gemming, and just to help you improve your character overall through gear and your stats. So the first thing you want to do after you've downloaded simcraft from the link in the description is go to the options tab. First thing there's a few options that you need to change. Some of the default settings are fine, others you'll need to change. First of all is iterations. Now the number of iterations is basically how many times the simulation is going to run. The more iterations you have, the longer the simulation will take, but the more accurate it's going to be. So if you want perfect accuracy, then 50,000 is the best way to do it, but if you're doing lots of reforging and stuff, then this is going to take a very, very long time. Good number to set it at is 10,000. Next you want to go down to the armory region, set it to your appropriate region, so for me that's EU. Set the spec to whether you want it to sim your active spec or your inactive spec, and that's pretty much it for this page. There's other things you can change, like if you want to test high movement fights, light movement fights, different kinds of fights like that, or change the length of the fight depending on what fight you want to sim. The more accurate these are to the fights you're trying to test, then the better result you're going to get, but you can leave them as a default for a general feel. Okay, next go to buffs and debuffs. You want to select all the buffs and debuffs that you have in your raid comp. If you have all of them, then leave that as default. Next, go over to scaling. Now you want to select Analyze Intellect, Hit, Crit, Haste, and Mastery. This is just for the default thing that we're doing now, but as you learn the program a bit more, you can analyze the things that you're looking to test. Normally, I might only analyze Haste and Mastery, for example. Finally, we'll go over to the Reforge plots. This one is for testing out what the optimum point of your reforging is. Now, for the purposes of this tutorial, I'm going to set the reforge amount to 2000 and the step amount to 250. Now basically what this means is it's going to figure out what's going to happen if you reforge 2000 of one step into another, and it's going to show you the amount of DPS you'll get for every 250 that you reforge. So I've selected Haste and Mastery, so it's gonna present me a graph which will show me what will happen if I reforge into Haste or into Mastery. Don't select more than two at once, or the simulation will take a very, very long time. And that's pretty much it for the setting it up. Next, you go to Import. You want to search your character, so obviously type in mine, click on it, and then you click Import. This brings up a bunch of code. We'll go through this a little bit more in a minute, but for now, leave that as it is, and all you do is click Simulate. Now, you can see the little bar there that starts going. That's going to take a very, very long time to complete. Now, once it's finished, you'll get taken to the results page, and you'll get presented with something like this. Now, this tells you how much DPS your character will do on average on a fight of that length, based upon the criteria you've given. And it's going to present you a lot of other really useful information. Now, first of all, we have scale factors. Now, these are really useful in determining how much each secondary stat is worth for you. So, for example, the scale factor for int we have is 4.81, whereas for haste it's 2.83. So that tells me that int is almost twice as good as haste, but not quite twice as good. You can also see this in a bar form here. Now, how is this useful? Well, let's say, for example, we have a gem. And let's say one gem has 80 intellect, and another gem has... Sorry, let's say one has 80 intellect and 160 mastery, and one has 320 mastery. So, what we would do to figure out what the value of these gems are, we would multiply the stat by the scale factors. So for the first gem, we multiply 80 by the scale factor of 4.81, which gives us 384.8. Then we would also multiply the value of mastery by its scale factor, which is 160 times 2.82, which gives you 451.2. So we total those up, and we find out that the value of this gem, for me, is 836. Now if we would do the same for the other gem, 320 multiplied by the scale factor for mastery, which is 2.82, we get 902.4. So we can see that this 320 mastery gem is better than the equivalent of an intellect mastery gem. Now you can do the same for reforging and for any other kind of changes to your stats. You can always multiply the stat by the scale factor and you'll figure out how much DPS you'll gain. Now when you need more than this when you're doing reforging, because this is only going to tell you how much it is when you gain that much of a stat. It's not going to tell you how much it is if you lose one stat and gain another, which is what happens in the case of reforging. Now for that you need a graph. Now this is your reforging graph. So basically what this does, this is what you're on now where the 0 is, and this side is what happens if you reforge mastery into haste, and this side is what happens if you reforge haste into mastery. So what we can see is currently we're on 127,505 DPS. If we reforge, for example, 1,000 mastery into haste, our DPS will drop to 127,419. Or if we reforge, I don't know, 200, our DPS goes up to 127,593. So the optimal point of your reforging is wherever this bar is highest. So it's somewhere around here. So it's reforging about around 200 mastery into haste would give me the highest possible DPS for my character. If you want to get more accurate on this, as you get closer and closer to it, you would decrease the reforge amount to maybe 500, and you would also decrease the step amount to say 50. And that will give you the most accurate reading for your graph. It will produce a smaller graph, so it would only go up to 500, but each of the different squares would show you more specific reforging. Okay, so there's a lot more you can actually do with this. If you want to, but what I've just explained there is really useful in terms of figuring out how to do reforging, figuring out what's upgrades. If you want to test out what items are upgrades, then you can either just equip it on the armory, then make sure you refresh this page and import your character again, and then run the simulation again and see if your DPS goes up. Every time you change your reforge, import your character again, simulate it, see if the DPS goes up, and then you'll know for sure that the reforging was worth it. You can also test out things that you don't have. So, for example, if you want to test out what would happen if you suddenly gained 1,000 mastery, for example, you can just add extra mastery onto one item and then run the simulation again, and it will tell you what happens if that happens. You can also change items. If you look at this ID here, this refers to the item ID on Wowhead. So if you want to try putting in a different item, you can put that ID in instead, and it will use that item instead. Obviously you'll need to change the gems to match how many sockets that item has. You can also test upgrades. Now that's one quite important thing, is that at the minute the armory does not show upgrades on weapons or on armor. So if you want to have a more accurate simulation, what you need to do, if you've upgraded, for example, say you've upgraded your weapon twice, once you've imported your character, at the end of the weapon line, put comma, upgrade equals 2, or upgrade equals 1 if you've only upgraded it once. Do that for any items you've upgraded and it will give you a more accurate simulation. Now the scale factors, you can also use them to do your reforging. If we go to the results section again and look at the scale factors, I can use these when I input them into Reforge Lite. So if I go into WoW, I'm at the reforging person, and I have Reforge Lite open. Now you can input the values that simcraft gives you into Reforge Lite to figure out how to do your reforging. So for example, haste gives me a value of 2.82. So in Reforge Lite, I would put 282. And sorry, haste gives me 283, mastery gives 282. So for haste, I would change that to 283. And crit, 191. You get the basic idea. Now after that, make sure you press enter after you've typed the number in. Then you can set a couple of caps. So I know I want at least this much haste, or I want at least this much, sorry, at most this much hit. Once you've put those in, you press calculate. Give it a second. Now this tells me that I want to reforge out of a bunch of hit into mastery. Now I don't actually want to do that because I don't want to be under hit cut, so I'm actually just going to increase the value of hit just to stop it trying to reforge me out of hit. Now this tells me that my reforging is already perfect. Press show. If it wasn't perfect, you would press show and then you'd hit reforge. It's grayed out for me because, as I say, it's all perfect already. Okay, so that's the basics of how to use simcraft. There's a lot more you can do with it. If you want to test out different numbers of enemies, you can test out changing the action priority list to see what happens. You can change when you start to AoE, you can change all your gear, you can change absolutely anything about it to try and test out what happens in different situations. And this can give you a big advantage when it comes to gearing and theory crafting your character. And all in all, it should make you a better warlock. I hope you've enjoyed this guide, and remember to like, comment and subscribe.